if we say that Africans hate themselves, that is serious. It sounds like a serious accusation. And it's shocking to say that you hate yourself. Is it possible for a person to hate who they are? Is it possible that Africans hate themselves? Just look at the way we behave and the way we talk. The person who travels to Europe is more important than the person who travels to another African country. That's why I've heard some comedians, Nigerian comedian, who was laughing at another person. I've been abroad. Where have you been to? I've been to Cameroon. Ha 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 ha. The whole crowd was laughing. If you leave Nigeria and go to Cameroon, if you leave Kenya and go to Cameroon, if you leave Cameroon and go to Ghana, you've not traveled abroad. To travel abroad means to go to Europe, to go to China, to go to America. That is to travel abroad. This is how we manifest self-hatred. Abroad is only Europe and America and China and other places. It's not Africa. It's not within Africa. While in Europe, people boast to have visited the big capitals of Europe. All right, they are Europeans, but they want to visit this place. They want to visit this place. They want to know this. But why do I want to go to Nigeria? Why do I want to go to Ghana? Why do I want to go to Senegal? I have to go to France. That is, those who go to France are more important. This is self-hatred. Do you realize that? And that is why our leaders, they prefer to go to Europe to be cured, because those who are cured there are more important. How did we come to so much self-hate? It has an explanation. In psychology, it is called the Stockholm syndrome. If you've watched films like The Gladiator, if you've watched films like Ben-Hur, if you've watched films like Spectacles, you will know what I'm talking about. That there is this attitude of slaves when you have been kidnapped, when you are detained, when you have been enslaved, when you are colonized. What the slave master does at first is teach you to know who commands here. You either love me or I kill you. So we learn the lesson very quickly because of our survival instinct. We learn to survive. We learn to kiss the whip that whips us. We learn to love the aggressor. We learn to love the slave master because we know that is the only way we have to survive. And so even when the slave master is humiliating you, you clap for him. Even when the slave master rapes your wife, you clap for him. Even when the slave master kills your child, you clap for him. This is a learned behavior. We have learned to love those who do harm to us because we want to survive. So we learn to hate ourselves. When I say hate ourselves, what do I mean? We try to please the slave master in order to survive. We adopt his values. We try to be like him. And by trying to be like him, we deny ourselves. We try to be more than ourselves by becoming more like the slave owner. We start hating everything about us because it represents us. And we start adopting everything that makes us similar to the slave master because we want to run away from ourselves. Because they have taught us that we are nothing, we can be nothing if we are not doing what they want us to do, if we do not have their values, and if we do not try to be the best in like them, okay, doing what they want us to do. So we learn the lesson and we try to imitate the slave owner in the best possible way. We want to be the best slave. So we learn to compete with ourselves. We want to be the best slave in order to please the slave master. And that is why when some slaves have been given the opportunity to control other slaves, they have usually been harder and harsher than even the slave owner, because they want to be better. They want to be like the slave master, and they want to be more than themselves. They want to be more than you. So I think this is where self-hatred starts, because we were hated, you were hated, you were taught to hate yourself and to love the other in order to survive. So you learned the lesson that to survive, you have to hate everything that is yours. Hate your identity, hate your values, hate your ways of doing things, adopt the ways of the slave owner, adopt the values of the slave owner, be like him, and hate everything that is yours, and then you will survive. That is the lesson that was learned, and that is the lesson that is transmitted. This is the Stockholm syndrome. And I think that is where some of us still are, generations after slavery was abandoned, generations after colonization was apparently ended. We are still slaves. How do we manifest this slavery, this mental slavery, this thing that I call the slave gene, that we transmit this slave mentality and this slave behavior to our children? We don't want to see anybody succeeding in the village. Instead of trying to find out how did he succeed, how is he succeeding, and to know that if there are more successful people in the village, then the village will be successful. No, what we want is for him to stop. If I am not succeeding, he shouldn't succeed. And so everybody in the village should be a failure. And so we are all happy. Nobody should progress in this place. This is self-hatred. I mean, if it is not self-hatred, tell me what it is. And even when our children travel out to the West, to Europe, to America, in the diaspora, they practice the same self-hatred. You find a fellow African who has succeeded to have their papers. They will never tell you how they got their papers, because they want to be the only ones to have papers. So they are the most important people because they have papers. If you want to have yours, go and find out. You find some fellow brothers, Africans, who have had a job, but they will not tell you how they got the job. They will not tell you how you can get a job. They'll prefer to hide it from you. They should be the only ones having a job. If you have a job, then you are successful. And how can we all be successful? Some people should be failures, so that, those of us who are successful should be looked up to as important people. So we cannot all succeed. This is self-hatred. You find people, you bring up an initiative to see how we all in the diaspora can help each other grow. And then people will just criticize the initiative. Ask them why. Then they'll bring up very funny reasons. But the reason is that if we are all succeeding, then we all look important. No, but if I have succeeded, if I have suffered, if I have struggled, then you should also struggle. You should also suffer. Why should I help you? Why should I help you? So, if this is not self-hatred, tell me what it is. So, this is behavior that has been learned, and we continue to transmit it. We continue to hate ourselves, and we think that we are doing very well. Even just greeting. You find a fellow black on the street, you greet them, and they look at you as shit. Among ourselves as black, we have classes. You look at each other like this, and you meet an African lady, you greet them. I don't know what they think, but they don't answer. You meet a fellow black person, you greet, and they look at you like this. So they have classified themselves. So if this is not self-hatred, tell me what it is. It is true that out here in Europe, maybe we learn to say everybody should mind their business, and that you are very cautious. You don't know who is who, and you don't want to run into problems, so you protect yourself. That is why we don't greet each other. That could be an excuse, but in reality, is that we don't trust each other. We hate each other. Now, let's go back home again. We look at our leaders. How do they behave? Our leaders, our heads of states, our presidents, ministers, and general directors, and all of these people, they travel to Europe and to America every now and then, and they see how schools are developed, they see how hospitals are built, they see how roads are built in Europe, they see how towns and places, sports, everything is developed. They see all of those things. But when they go back home, what do? It is like they have never been out, they have never seen, but they don't do anything to imitate They don't try to build hospitals back home. They don't try to build roads. They don't try to build schools. They don't try to educate, to imitate what they see. If this is not self-hatred, tell me what it is. Now, when they are sick, they prefer to be evacuated to Europe, to America, to be cured. So they feel important. They send their children abroad. I mean, having all the money to build very good schools, very good hospitals back at home, to build roads. Some of them even prefer to build hospitals in Europe or in America, to have schools, to have hotels and all of these things out in Europe and in America, instead of building them in their own home. If this is not self-hatred, tell me what it is. What is happening here is that we continue wanting to be slaves, even though we know that there is no room for progress. But here, there is room for progress. But if we are to progress, then we have to progress together. But since we don't want to progress together, we prefer to remain there. That is, slaves, but we are the first slaves. And since we are the first slaves, we are the most important in our group. If we want to grow with others as independent people, then everybody will grow and everybody will be important. But we don't want everybody to be important. We want to be the only important people. And that's why we prefer to be first slaves than to be the last leaders. This is slave mentality. It's shocking, but this is what happens. Now, just look at our consumption attitudes. When you have clothes, when you have shoes, what do you say? A watch made in China, made in Japan, made in Europe, made in France, made in... Those are the type of things we value. The things that are made out of Africa. When you say it is made in Nigeria, or is it made in Calabar or Yoruba or Aba, made in Nairobi, made in Soweto, no. It has to be made in Germany, made in Japan. We feel more important when it is made in. This is self-hatred. We hate ourselves, isn't it? How else do you explain that if it is not self-hatred? This same attitude is transmitted in schools. We learn European history. We know all about the Spanish Civil War. We know all about the First World War. We know all about fishing in Norway and industrialization, shipbuilding in I don't know what. But who taught you African history? Who taught you about your own country? How serious do we take our own history? If this is not self-hatred, then tell me what it is. When we say something is local, all right, we say it is locally made, it is traditionally made. What do we mean when we say that in Africa? We mean that it is inferior, it is low quality, because it is local. It is locally made, it is traditional. This is self-hatred, because in Europe, those things that are locally made, those things that are traditional, those artisanal things, those things that are handmade, art that is handmade is more expensive. It has a trademark because it needs time, it needs dedication, it needs personalization, and it is more expensive than other things that are mass produced. But back home, local, traditional is inferior quality. This is self-hatred. If you did not know, then you know it today. Our traditional things have to be more expensive because people spend a lot of time doing those things with their hands. It is a lot of work and it's a lot of love and dedication that has been put into it. So some of those things have to be more expensive. But how do we treat them? It is self-hatred. And you see this self-hatred in the way we spend. When you go into a supermarket and you find these goods that have been imported from Europe, you see them all with their prices. Most of our rich people, they don't bargain when they go into the supermarket. They buy directly. But then when you go out into the street, you see a woman, a man who has spent time making a bag, who has spent time making clothes, who has spent time making, a lot of energy, sweat has been put into it. They will bargain until, and they'll pay the least. But when they go into a supermarket, that's when they show how rich they are. They buy. So we give more money to those who are rich, and to those who have dedicated more time and made very precious things, we don't want to pay. So the person selling at the roadside, we buy very cheap and we send them home with nothing. Then we go into the supermarket and we spend without thinking. If this is not self-hatred, then tell me what it is. We don't want to progress together. Where do we go from this? The first thing is awareness. The first thing is we have to come to the awareness that this is what is happening. Because nobody hates themselves knowingly. It is an unconscious process. We do it without knowing. Now, if we realize that this is what is happening, then we are on the first step to stopping it. Now, as I mentioned those films, Spectacles, Ben-Hur, Gladiator, you need to watch one of those films, that of Spectacles, for example. Right? This moment when the gladiator is fighting with a fellow slave. Who takes the money? The slave owner. And the crowd is cheering. Ah, he has won, he has won. What has he won? He has killed the fellow slave. But do you know that tomorrow it will be your turn and you'll be killed? And who takes the money of your fight and the killing of your brother? The slave owner. And all you have is, well done, good and faithful slave. That is all you get. A smile. And today it is possible. I mean, white people do not even need to kill black people today. It suffices for a white man to smile and give a tap on the back of a black man, give him a little bread, and he goes out and kill you and kill your family and your whole village. It suffices for the white to smile, give you a few francs, you destroy the whole village. If this is not self-hatred, tell me what it is. But then in this film, we see how this gladiator, after having fought and won, is about to kill the fellow slave, and everybody is saying, down, 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 kill him. That is when he realizes that this is not the enemy. The enemy is up there cheering and waiting for me to kill my fellow brother. And he turns and uses his sword and throws it at the slave owner. That is the aha moment. Now I see. Until we come to that moment, until we come to the realization that this is not the enemy, your brother is not the enemy, but the person making money out of your sweat, out of your fight, out of your killing your brother, that is the real enemy. Until you come to that realization, we have not started the journey. And no matter how far and how much we travel, we will never reach home, because the real journey has not started. It starts with awareness. Now I see. We have to come to that moment. Until we come to that moment, we are still very far from home. Still very far. That would be the first step.